I never told my son-in-law that I spent 28 years as a bomb technician for the county sheriff's department, the guy they called when nobody else would walk toward the thing that was ticking. To him, I was just a soft-spoken 66-year-old man who fed birds off his back deck and drove a Buick that smelled like peppermint. He told my daughter that if she ever tried to divorce him, he'd make sure she never saw her son again. She filed anyway. And when he pulled into my driveway that night with two men I'd never seen before, well, my wife and I were already standing on the front steps waiting for him because I'd known he was coming for 6 hours. Before I go on, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight, friend. And if you believe a father never really clocks out, hit that like button for me. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was in the garage regluing a chair leg when my phone buzzed against the workbench. It was my daughter, Rachel. Just 4 words. Dad, he took Caleb. I didn't call her back. When your child sends you 4 words like that, you don't ask questions, you move. I set the glue down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and I was in the Buick before I'd even decided to be. Rachel had married Dean Whitfield 6 years ago. Dean ran a chain of car dealerships across 3 counties, the kind of man who shook your hand a little too hard and looked past your shoulder the whole time he was doing it. I'd never liked him. Not because he was rich, I don't care about money, but because of the way he talked to waitresses, the way he talked to Rachel when he thought nobody else was listening. I'd bitten my tongue for 6 years because that's what you do when your daughter tells you she's happy, even when your gut tells you otherwise. The gut doesn't stay quiet forever. I drove the 15 miles into town with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind doing something it hadn't done in years, cataloging. Exits. Distances. Who might be armed and who wouldn't be. Old habits. You spend 3 decades diffusing things that want to kill you, and your brain never really unlearns how to sort a room by threat level. It just goes quiet for a while. It doesn't die. Dean's house sat behind an iron gate on the good side of the lake, the kind of place with a fountain out front that never turned off. I didn't bother with the gate. I pulled the Buick right up onto the grass, walked to the front door, and rang the bell like a man delivering a casserole. Dean answered in a golf polo, a glass of something amber in his hand, and that same smug half-smile he always wore like it was stitched to his face. "Well, if it isn't Robert," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Come to beg on Rachel's behalf? Where's my grandson, Dean?" "He's my son too, old man." "Or did she forget to mention that when she ran off to your place crying?" He took a slow sip of his drink. "She wants a divorce, she can have one. But Caleb stays with me. And if she tries to fight me on custody, I've got 3 lawyers who'll make sure she never sees him again except in a courtroom, supervised like some kind of criminal. You understand me?" I kept my shoulders soft. I let my voice shake a little, the way it does sometimes when I'm tired, which wasn't hard because I was tired, just not the way he thought. "Please, son, he's 7 years old. He needs his mother." "He needs stability," Dean snapped. "Something your daughter's never been real good at providing, emotionally." He smiled at his own cruelty like it was a clever thing to say. "You should go on home, Robert. Tell Rachel to sign the papers I sent over, or this gets a lot uglier for everybody." I nodded, slow, the way I used to nod at men holding wires I hadn't traced yet. "Let them think you're harmless. Let them think the situation is under control." I turned like I was leaving, defeated, and I was 3 steps down the walk when I heard a small voice, muffled, coming from somewhere past the garage. "Grandpa?" Caleb's voice, coming from inside a car. I didn't run. Running gives away everything. I turned back toward the house at the same unhurried pace. And I saw it now, Dean's black Range Rover parked at the side of the garage, the windows cracked 2 inches. A 7-year-old boy strapped into a booster seat in 90-degree heat, sweat already darkening the collar of his shirt. Dean had put him in the car to cool down after a tantrum, he told me later, like that explained anything. What it told me was everything I needed to know about the 6 years I'd spent being polite to this man. I didn't say another word to Dean. I walked to that car, opened the door, unbuckled my grandson, and carried him to the Buick. Dean shouted something behind me about trespassing, about lawyers, about how I'd regret this. I didn't turn around. I buckled Caleb into the back seat, cranked the air conditioning as high as it would go, and pulled out of that driveway doing the speed limit, not 1 mile over, because a man in my old line of work learns that panic is what gets people caught and calm is what gets people out. Caleb didn't say much on the drive. He just held my hand over the console the whole way, his small fingers wrapped around 2 of mine, and I let him, steering one-handed past every truck stop and gas station between Dean's lake house and my daughter's apartment. When we pulled up, Rachel came off the porch steps so fast she nearly fell, and she pulled that boy out of the car and into her arms like she was trying to fold him back inside her own body. "He put him in the car, Rach," I said quietly. In the heat, said it was punishment for a tantrum. Her face went through about 4 different colors. "I'm calling my lawyer tonight. I'm calling Child Protective Services. I don't care what it costs, Dad. I don't care what he threatened. Let's get you both inside first," I said. "We'll figure the rest out at the house." We drove out to my place, out past the tree line where the cell service gets spotty, and the porch light is the only thing burning for half a mile in any direction. Ellen, my wife, was waiting at the door before we'd even parked, because I'd called her from the road, and she took one look at Rachel's face and Caleb's flushed cheeks and didn't ask a single question. She just opened her arms and got them both inside, got the boy some water and a cool washcloth, got Rachel sitting down before her legs gave out from under her. I stood alone on the porch for a minute, looking out at the tree line, and that's when Rachel's phone started buzzing in my jacket pocket, where she'd handed it to me without thinking on the drive over. I looked at the screen. "Dean." I answered it and didn't say anything. "You think you're some kind of hero, old man?" Dean's voice came through, thick with whiskey and rage now. "You took my son. That's kidnapping. I've got half a dozen witnesses who saw you snatch him right off my property." I said nothing. I let him talk. "I know exactly where your little house in the woods is, Robert. I've been out there for Thanksgiving, remember? I know that dirt road. I know there's no cameras. I know it's just you and your wife and nobody around for a mile. You put my son back in a car and you drive him back here tonight, or I swear to God I will come get him myself, and you will not enjoy how that conversation goes." I finally spoke, low and even. "You should think carefully before you come out here, Dean." "Is that a threat, old man?" "It's a fact," I said, and I hung up. Ellen came out onto the porch behind me, drying her hands on a dish towel, and she didn't need me to explain what she'd just heard through the screen door. 26 years married to a bomb tech, she'd learned to read my face the way I used to read a device, quickly and without panic. "He's coming," she said. "He's coming," I agreed. "Do we call the sheriff?" "We call the sheriff," I said. "But he won't get here in time if Dean's drunk enough to actually try it. So we get ready first, and we call second." This is the part of my life I didn't tell my daughter about for a long time, mostly because she was young when I did this work, and I never wanted her lying awake wondering if her father was coming home. For 28 years, I was the man they called when a device turned up in a car, a mailbox, a courthouse lobby. You learn patience in that line of work that most people never have to learn, because patience is the only thing standing between you and a very short obituary. You learn to read a threat calmly, to move deliberately, to never, ever let panic make your decisions for you. Dean thought he was dealing with a soft old man who baked bread and watched golf. He had no idea he was about to drive his black Range Rover onto the one piece of property in the county where a man had spent 3 decades thinking through exactly what to do when someone dangerous shows up uninvited. I walked the perimeter of the house while Ellen sat with Rachel and Caleb inside. I checked the motion sensor lights I'd installed years back, more out of habit than necessity, the kind of thing a man does after a career like mine, so he can sleep at night. I made sure the old shed was locked. I called my nephew Marcus, a deputy 2 towns over, off duty that night, and I told him what had happened at Dean's lake house. Told him about Caleb in the hot car, told him Dean was on his way out here, liquored up and furious. "Robert, don't do anything," Marcus said. "I'm calling it in right now, and I'm coming myself. Give me 25 minutes. He might be here in 10, I said. "Then stall him," Marcus said. "Whatever you do, don't let this get physical. I need him alive, and I need you not in a cell tonight." I told him I understood, and I did understand. But understanding a thing and being willing to bet your grandson's safety on a stranger's restraint are 2 very different postures, and I was not going to stand on that porch unprepared while a drunk man with something to prove drove up my road in the dark. So Ellen and I sat down on the porch steps together in the cool of the evening, and we waited. I made a pot of coffee, because there is nothing on this earth that settles a man's hands like the simple, ordinary act of pouring a cup of coffee while trouble is on its way. Ellen sat beside me with her hand resting on my knee, not saying much, because after 26 years she learned that when I go quiet like that, it isn't fear, it's focus. Headlights came up the tree line at 9:40 that night. 2 vehicles, Dean's Range Rover, and behind it, a pickup truck I didn't recognize, carrying 2 men I'd never seen in my life. They parked crooked across my gravel, the way people do when they've had too much to drink and too little sense, and Dean climbed out first, stumbling slightly, his golf polo now untucked, his face red with liquor and fury. "Where's my son?" he shouted across the yard, loud enough to send the porch lights flickering on, loud enough that I heard Caleb start crying softly through the screen door behind me. I stood up slowly from the steps. Ellen stood with me. "Dean, you need to turn around and go home," I said, keeping my voice level, the same voice I used to use talking a nervous rookie through a wire he was scared to cut. "You've had too much to drink. And you brought men onto my property? I don't know. That's not a conversation. That's a mistake you're about to make worse." "I'm not leaving without my son," Dean said, taking a step toward the porch. The two men from the truck fell in step behind him, one of them cracking his knuckles like it meant something. "You put a 7-year-old in a locked car in 90-degree heat," I said. "That's the last time you'll be alone with that boy without a judge in the room. Now I'm going to ask you one time to get back in your vehicle." Dean laughed, that same ugly laugh from his front doorway that afternoon. "You gonna stop me, old man? You and your wife? Look at you. You're what, 65? I could put you on the ground myself." "You could try," I said. That's when the first set of headlights came around the bend behind them. Marcus in his personal truck, no lights or siren, because he'd told me on the phone he didn't want to spook anybody into doing something stupid before he had eyes on the scene. He parked at the bottom of the drive and walked up slow, badge already out, and I watched Dean's whole posture change the second he saw it, the liquor courage draining out of his shoulders like water out of a cracked glass. "Deputy Marcus Hale," he said. "Dean Whitfield, I'm going to need you and these two gentlemen to step back to your vehicles." "This is a family matter," Dean said, some of the growl still left in his voice, though it was fading fast. "A family matter doesn't usually involve two men I don't recognize showing up on private property at 10 o'clock at night," Marcus said. "And it definitely doesn't involve a 7-year-old left in a locked vehicle this afternoon, which I understand there are photographs of, taken by a neighbor across the street from your residence." Dean's face went pale under the porch light. I hadn't told him about the neighbor. I hadn't known about the neighbor. But apparently Rachel had already been quietly building a file for months. Photographs, text messages, a recording of Dean threatening to make sure she'd never see Caleb again because she'd known, in her gut, the way I'd known in mine, that this day was coming long before either of us said it out loud. Marcus separated the two men from the truck first, took their information, sent them off with a warning that made them leave rubber on my gravel getting out of there. Then he turned to Dean. "Given what I'm seeing tonight, and given what I understand is a pending custody matter, I'd strongly recommend you get yourself a lawyer, sober up, and go home," Marcus said. "Because right now I've got grounds to arrest you for public intoxication and reckless endangerment, and if you take one more step toward that porch, I'll have grounds for a great deal more." Dean looked at me one last time, and for the first time since I'd known him, there was something other than arrogance in his face. It might have been fear. It might have just been the sudden, sobering math of a man realizing the story he'd told himself about who was weak and who was strong in this yard had been wrong from the very beginning. He got in his Range Rover and he left. He didn't say another word. Ellen let out a breath beside me. She must have been holding since the headlights first came up the drive, and she leaned her head against my shoulder for a moment before we went back inside to check on our daughter and grandson. It's been a little over a year since that night on the porch, and life looks different for all of us now. Rachel's divorce was finalized 8 months later. The photographs from the neighbor, the recordings, and Dean's own drunken visit to my property that night, all of it ended up in front of a judge who did not look kindly on a man who'd locked his son in a hot car and then shown up intoxicated at his in-laws' house with two strangers in tow. Dean got supervised visitation only, twice a month, with a court-appointed monitor in the room. His dealerships took a hit, too. Once word got around town about the custody hearing, the way word does in a place where everybody still knows everybody. He's still out at the lake house. He's mostly alone out there now. Caleb is doing well. Better than well. He's back to being a regular 7-year-old boy who likes dinosaurs and complains about vegetables. And most nights he sleeps over here at our place, out past the tree line, where it's quiet and the only thing that comes up that gravel road after dark is a deer or a possum, nothing more. Rachel moved into a little house 2 miles from us. She started her own bookkeeping business out of a spare room, and she's more herself now than I've seen her in 6 years. Steadier, lighter, like she finally set something down she'd been carrying so long she forgot it was heavy. As for Ellen and me, we're still out here in the same house, same tree line, same porch. I still make coffee every morning and sit out there and watch the sun come up over the ridge. Caleb likes to sit with me some mornings, quiet, the two of us just watching the birds work the feeder Ellen keeps stocked by the porch rail. I spent 28 years walking toward things that were built to hurt people, so that other families wouldn't have to. I thought I'd left all that behind me when I retired. But I learned something that night I hadn't expected to learn, again, at 66 years old, that whatever you spend your life learning to protect, you never really stop protecting it. Retirement changes your schedule. It doesn't change what you are. If there's one thing I'd want anybody watching this to take with them, it's this. The loudest man in the room is almost never the most dangerous one. Dean stood in my driveway shouting, because shouting was the only tool he had ever needed in his life. Real strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It sits quietly on a porch with a cup of coffee, and it waits. And when the moment finally comes, it does exactly what needs to be done, without raising its voice even once. If this story meant something to you tonight, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and tell me in the comments below, where are you watching from? And do you believe a parent's instinct to protect their child never really retires?